You know how some families just have bad luck? Well, the Blackthorne family took that concept and cranked it up to 11. Their name used to mean something in New England high society. Wealth, power, respect. Now, it's barely whispered. And when it is, it's usually by teenagers daring each other to go near what's left of their estate. The Blackthorne estate sits in what used to be Ravens Hollow, Massachusetts. Picture this massive colonial mansion with imported stone iron gates that look like they belong in a Gothic novel and stained glass windows covered in weird symbols. Visitors back in the day thought those symbols were just fancy decorations. They were wrong. See, the thing about the Blackthorne place is that it never felt right. People who stayed too long would leave shaken, swearing they heard voices in empty rooms, footsteps where no one was walking, and sometimes, this is where it gets really creepy, children laughing. The Blackthornes didn't have any kids living there at the time. The disappearances started early. Mental breakdowns became common among their visitors. Entire families would visit the estate and just vanish. Yet somehow, the Blackthornes themselves seemed untouchable. No plague touched them, no war affected their fortune. It was like something was protecting them, or maybe demanding payment from them, generation after generation. This isn't your typical ghost story, though. This is about a bloodline that might have authored its own curse. The Blackthornes weren't just victims, they were participants. They paid prices that should never be paid, performed rituals that should have been forgotten, and opened doors that should have stayed sealed. Were those cellar symbols really part of an ancient order? Did they actually dig something beneath the east wing that was never meant to see daylight? Plenty of people have tried to find out. Some got answers. Most never came back to share them. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a family whose history is soaked in tragedy, madness, and practices that would make your skin crawl. We're asking the question that's haunted New England for centuries. Were the Blackthornes haunted, or were they the ones doing the haunting? Before we're done, you'll have to ask yourself something even more disturbing. Do bloodlines just fade away with time, or do they sometimes wake up? Let me tell you about Sir Alaric Blackthorne. In 1631, this British aristocrat showed up in the New World with more baggage than just his trunks. Officially, he was here on crown business, helping establish settlements. Unofficially, London's elite were probably thrilled to see him go. The man had a thing for forbidden books, sketchy rituals, and hanging out with groups the church had banned centuries ago. Alaric bought land in what would become Ravens Hollow, land the local indigenous people had abandoned. They called it the ground where the sky listens, which should have been his first red flag. But Alaric didn't just ignore the warnings. He built the most elaborate foundation anyone in the colonies had seen. And then things got weird. Fast. His harvests were unnaturally abundant. Silver practically jumped out of the stream near his property, but success came with a price. By 1653, 3 of his 6 children were dead. One aged decades overnight, another was found miles away, drained of blood. The third, she vanished from a locked nursery, leaving only her cradle gently rocking at dawn. The local clergy accused the family of heresy, pointing to strange carvings above their doorways and rumors of midnight forest gatherings. But money talks, and no charges stuck. Then there's Nathaniel Wentlow's journal. This poor guy worked as the family's tutor and bookkeeper until 1670 when he vanished. His journal, found centuries later under a floorboard, tells of books in unknown languages, violent fits among the Blackthorne children, and Alaric talking to a painting in the cellar that changed each time he returned. His final entry? The blood is not theirs. It was never theirs to give. The madness didn't die with Alaric. His sons, Thaddeus and Elijah, split the dark legacy. Thaddeus kept the estate while Elijah headed south with followers, forming something called the Algid Fellowship. Several members were later tried for ritualistic killings in Virginia. The symbols they used, identical to those carved into the Blackthorne Manor's foundation. By 1700, the Blackthorne name meant both prestige and dread. Engagements were broken when suitors heard the family rumors. The manor earned its nickname, the House of Whispers. People reported rooms without sound, walls that seemed to breathe, and voices in empty halls that always seemed to follow the birth of each Blackthorne child. But here's what really gets me. Why did they stay? What kept them on that cursed land as death circled closer with each generation? Pride? Obligation? Or had they sealed some ancient pact that bound them to the soil and to something buried beneath it? The new Blackthorne Manor, completed in 1710, was wrong from the start. I'm not talking about bad feng shui, I mean architecturally, fundamentally wrong. Built with imported Scottish stone and Gothic details, it was huge for its time but bizarrely asymmetrical. Corridors twisted in ways that hurt your head to think about. Some staircases literally ended at brick walls. The blueprints showed sections leading nowhere, rooms that weren't meant for living, or maybe weren't meant to be found. That's when the whispers really started, not just in the house but spreading through nearby towns. People heard bells with no source, saw lights drifting through trees like funeral processions, and heard screams that seemed to come from underground. The manor had become more than a home. It was a barrier, a fortress, a prison, and it was destroying the family from within. Amelia Blackthorne, wife of Thaddeus II, wrote to her cousin in 1722 about hearing her dead daughter's voice behind a sealed fireplace. "It is her voice, cousin. I swear to God she calls to me by name. But it is not gentle." Her letters stop abruptly in 1723. Official cause of death? Lost at sea. Strange for a woman who hadn't left the manor in 7 years. But nothing compared to the hollow birthday of 1779. The Blackthorne twins, Catherine and Delphine, threw a party. 12 children from neighboring families attended. By morning, every single child was gone. No signs of struggle, no evidence of escape, just their shoes lined up neatly around the ballroom, and in the center, a blackened toy horse no one recognized. The family descended into paranoia. They nailed mirrors face down, sealed hallways with iron, forbade servants from going downstairs alone. One surviving note warns, "If it knocks, do not open. If it weeps, you are already too late." They found this in a hidden compartment inside a child's cradle. Julian Blackthorne, the last of this generation, was committed by his own staff in 1803. His diary describes finding a second house beneath the manor, built by hands not his own. He wrote about descending into hidden catacombs that grew warmer the deeper he went, until the walls bled and the floor pulsed as if breathing. His diary ends with one line scrawled across the back cover: "It's awake. It wants more." After Julian's removal, they locked the manor for 17 years. The groundskeeper maintained the perimeter, but the house itself was left untouched, yet it didn't decay like it should have. And those who tried to break in reported the same thing: whispers that followed them home, a coldness that never left, and nightmares that eventually stopped, fatally. When Blackthorne Manor reopened in 1804, something fundamental had changed. The family withdrew from Rom society, completely obsessed with what they called the weakening of the blood. Windows stayed shuttered year-round, deliveries came only at sundown, and the rumors took a darker turn: cult activity. Dr. Henry Marrow, hired as the family physician, left behind notes about an inner circle called the Ashen Dawn. They wore linen robes embroidered with symbols that didn't match any known religious or magical system. Their midnight ceremonies happened in the West Chamber, the Sanguine Room, where witnesses swore the walls would bleed during certain moon phases. By mid-century, staff disappearances became common. A federal investigation launched after a magistrate's nephew vanished while working as a delivery hand. The report describes impossible architecture in the manor's lower levels and a heavy iron door carved with what looked like runes mixed with human vertebrae. It ends abruptly. "We hear them in the walls. Something is behind the door. We are not well." Meanwhile, townspeople reported hooded processions through the forest, carrying animal skulls and glass lanterns. Smoke rose from the estate's chimneys, though no light showed inside. Some heard chanting in an unidentifiable language. Others saw ghostly silhouettes in windows of supposedly empty rooms. The most damning evidence emerged by accident. In 1886, someone found a wax cylinder recording in a collapsed barn on old Blackthorne land. When restored, it revealed minutes of overlapping voices chanting in a harsh, guttural dialect. Linguists can't agree on its origin. Some say corrupted Latin, others claim Sumerian roots. The most disturbing theory? It's not human language at all. Matching this audio to recovered blueprints revealed something chilling. Certain rooms were designed to amplify sound waves. The Red Hall, the octagonal parlor, built for sonic rituals, to summon something or communicate with whatever they'd awakened below. Newspaper archives show increased disappearances, fires, and livestock mutilations across Blackthorne trade routes. Yet no family member was ever charged. No arrests, no trials, nothing. The era's final mystery involves Cornelius Blackthorne's missing manuscript, The Soil Remembers. A librarian's 1890 record says it was sealed in wax to be opened only upon the return of the blood. It hasn't been seen since. By century's end, the Blackthorne line had nearly vanished. Those who knew them described the family as decaying from the inside. Some claimed they used blood in their ink, their book bindings, even to stain the sanguine room's floors. One last whisper escaped before silence fell. A note slipped under a church door 20 miles away, written in what experts insist wasn't ink. The gate will open. It remembers who we are. By the 1890s, the Blackthorne name had faded from memory. No celebrations, no guards, no smoke from chimneys. The family wasn't declared dead. They were simply forgotten, or so everyone hoped. These hollow years saw the estate abandoned but far from quiet. Locals reported flickering candles deep in the woods, low chanting before dawn, and strange symbols carved into border trees, a language even occult scholars couldn't crack. Fear of the land itself spread like disease. Then in 1904, Esther Blackthorne emerged from nowhere. The last known descendant appeared briefly to file property deeds in Salem. Officers described her as having sunken, watery eyes and a voice that quivered as if barely tethered to her own body. She was heavily pregnant but wouldn't name the father, claiming she was under vow. Days later, she vanished. No birth certificate exists for her child, but witnesses saw her leaving the manor barefoot, carrying a silent baby. Some said the infant had ghastly pale skin, missing fingernails, blackened gums, eyes that never blinked. Just rumors until 1921, when lightning revealed a small mummified body buried in salt under a collapsed chimney. Modern DNA testing found no matches, but carved inside the skull was a symbol identical to one from Cornelius Blackthorne's lost manuscript. The 1920s brought journalist Margot Ellis, whose Hollow Bloodline series gained a cult following. She interviewed a 93-year-old former Blackthorne maid who claimed she'd seen children walk into the cellar and never come out. Margot's final article promised photographic proof of hidden chambers and the bleeding wall. It never printed. Margot vanished the night before publication. Her typewritten pages were found soaked in human plasma. Her camera turned up months later in a river, the film destroyed except for one image, a grainy shot of the manor's east corridor, with a tall, impossibly thin figure at the end, its joints bent inward, standing in reverse. Her disappearance reignited public fear. The estate was sealed again, property rights shuffled through shell companies. In 1935, plans for a nearby reservoir revealed vast chambers beneath the Blackthorne grounds, some 70 feet deep. Engineers halted immediately. No public explanation was given. The project was abandoned within the year. These years haunt researchers because of what continued to echo forward. The disappearances, the contradictions, the evidence of something stirred from sleep it should never have known. Was the Blackthorne bloodline truly ended with Esther, or had it simply changed shape? Because carved into the iron sealing the East Wing cellars, long after the family was gone, are 3 words: it still breathes. After a decade of silence, evil doesn't die. It waits. In 1941, a nameless boy appeared at St. Catriona's Asylum outside Salem. 4 or 5 years old, no identification, no birth record. For 38 days he didn't speak. When he finally did, it was in a language that hadn't been used for 3,000 years, something close to Old Akkadian, according to the ancient history professor they brought in. They named him Thomas. He talked to people who weren't there. Lights flickered outside his room betin. Ween midnight and 3 a.m. One nurse who cared for him killed herself, leaving a suicide note filled with Blackthorne family names and dates spanning 2 centuries. When investigators checked, dozens matched actual burial records from the Blackthorne crypt. By 1952, Thomas was fostered in Davenport, far from Raven's Hollow. At 15, his notebooks filled with geometric symbols and architectural blueprints, designs that matched the lost Eastern blueprints of Blackthorne Manor, including trap corridors, never publicly released. Everyone dismissed it as imagination. Then, in 1958, he vanished. 3 months later, they found him at the Blackthorne grounds. Silent, barefoot, eyes dilated and unresponsive to light. He'd drawn a 12-foot chalk diagram in the dirt. A 12-pointed star ringed with Blackthorne names and unrecognizable sigils. Inside the ruined manor, they found fresh blood in the East Wing library, burned candles, and Thomas's journal stuffed up the chimney. His barely legible entries read like confessions from someone gripped by something ancient. He wrote in Latin, Hebrew, and English. The family never died. Not really. The blood called me back, asked me to listen. I saw them born again beneath the floor. I heard their breath in the roots. I opened the gate. I opened the gate. I opened... The last page repeated that phrase 12 times before trailing into silence. Thomas vanished again in 1960, this time for good. But in 1967, a body was found hanging above the shattered ancestral portrait in the Blackthorne library. Forensics said it was Thomas, though he'd aged less than 7 years. Official cause, suicide. But they couldn't explain the room. Shelves arranged in a circle, the mirror shattered outward as if something had burst through from inside, and carved into the floorboards beneath the body. I found my blood. I gave it back. Was Thomas really Esther's lost son, or just a broken vessel for something older? After his death, the whispers stopped. For 20 years, silence. The woods overgrew the gates. The Blackthorne name began fading again. But some say it wasn't peace. It was silence, waiting. The 1980s brought a new breed of visitor to Blackthorne Manor: paranormal investigators, urban explorers, occult enthusiasts. As horror became mainstream obsession, the estate transformed from cautionary tale to dark pilgrimage site. What they found was worse than any movie. Halloween 1982. 6 Hartford high schoolers entered the ruins. Only 2 returned. One was found wandering Route 79, covered in deep scratches, unable to speak. The other spent months in psychiatric care before describing black corridors that shifted, ceilings that breathed, faces in mirrors made of bone and ash. He swore something followed him home, a smell of old blood and wet stone. Online forums exploded with Blackthorne theories. Dark web communities shared accounts of audio imprints, phantom voices in forgotten dialects. Multiple visitors reported the same impossible room in the East Wing that appeared differently to each person, sometimes a nursery, sometimes a confessional, sometimes a mausoleum. But everyone agreed on one terrifying detail. When you entered that room, you didn't just hear your name, you forgot it. In 2002, a Connecticut paranormal team got rare state permission to investigate. They live-streamed their entry. 9 people went in. The stream cut after a male voice whispered, "It's listening." They never came out. Only a single camera was recovered, melted from the inside by what officials called exposure to unknown accelerant heat, a phrase that appears nowhere else in police records. The pattern continued. Filmmakers, cultists, ghost hunters, most fled quickly. Some never left at all. A theology student researching the Blackthorne lineage in 2016 abandoned his thesis halfway through. Months later, they found him in a Lisbon church with torn fragments of his notes in his mouth, covered in spiraled writing no expert could translate. Then came the 2016 thunderstorm that changed everything. The eastern hillside collapsed, and emergency crews stumbled onto something unthinkable: burial crypts beneath the estate stacked with human remains from different centuries. The clothing, DNA, bone density, all wrong. Some showed surgical mutilation. Others were wrapped in ritual cloth with metallic fibers, sealed in salt. Skulls bore the same sigils Thomas Blackthorne had sketched in 1952. None of the remains matched any public records. The deepest vault held the worst discovery: a narrow coffin containing a perfectly preserved man in his 30s. Eyes sealed with wax. No organs, just an empty chest cavity holding two items: a pendant shaped like a downward tree and a ring with the Blackthorne crest. It wasn't Thomas. No one knows who it was. The state resealed everything, citing soil contamination, but 2019 satellite photos show military fencing, motion sensors, and infrared anomalies suggesting movement inside the ruins. Regular, timed movement, like a ritual. Today, the estate stands as a monument to something we can't understand, a nexus of vanished lives and impossible architecture spanning centuries, and those who research it too long report the same terrifying pattern. The more we look, the more it looks back. Someone, or something, responds to attention. So here we are, at the end of a story that doesn't really end. The Blackthorne family wasn't just wealthy aristocrats who went mad. When you trace their timeline from Sir Alaric's arrival through centuries of disappearances, rituals, and blood-soaked secrets, you don't find coincidence. You find a pattern. Behaviors repeated, numbers recurring, doors marked in forgotten languages tied to no earthly faith. This wasn't random, this was orchestrated. But by whom? Or what? Some say the Blackthornes were victims, cursed, possessed, or bound by ancient wrath. Others believe the land itself was evil before the first stone was laid. The darkest theory? The family made a deal with something beyond human understanding. Each generation wasn't born but inherited, created to fulfill a purpose we were never meant to witness. The evidence overwhelms and confuses. Dozens dead, history erased or sealed, property records blacked out, artifacts that defy explanation, preserved bodies, mirrored rooms, blood-written manuscripts. Yet we still don't know what the Blackthornes wanted, or if they ever acted with free will. Were they gatekeepers or prisoners? Was the manor a home or a mouth? Each investigation raises more questions. Witnesses describe different versions of the same rooms. It's as if the house itself shifts, evolves, adapts. And behind its walls, behind the very concept of the Blackthorne name, something watches, something waits. The manor grounds remain sealed. Authorities won't discuss anything Blackthorne related. Academic investigations are denied without explanation. Even rumors of new ownership meet silence. Yet reports trickle in, lights in trees, symbols on fogged windows, forgotten lullabies on the wind. History teaches us that true horror doesn't announce itself. It whispers, it builds, it roots itself in people and places, breeding fear that outlives time and stories that refuse to die. So I leave you with questions that have no comfortable answers. Was the Blackthorne family truly cursed, or is what they uncovered a pact, a presence, a purpose, still unfolding? Is their history an ending, or just the beginning? And most disturbing, if something calls to you from that place, from the cellar, the mirror, or the woods, you must ask yourself what all those who vanished surely faced. Will you answer it? Thank you for joining us in the shadows. If this tale has haunted you as much as it has us, share your theories below. Is the Blackthorne story a forgotten cult case, generational psychosis, or something not human at all? And if you're brave or foolish enough to want more, stay close, because stories like the Blackthornes don't end, they wait.